Tucker Carlson interviewed the Prime Minister of Qatar. It was a very non-confrontational interview, with a lot of softball questions being asked. It was all a bit too friendly. Nothing about Qatar being part of the Muslim Brotherhood, a Muslim movement that wants to implement Sharia law all over the world. Nothing about Qatar financially supporting terror groups, even on US soil. Even Osama bin Laden thanked Qatar for its support. As I was watching it, I found it all a little bit too familiar. Tucker has also interviewed a Palestinian priest, and as with his interview with the Prime Minister of Qatar, not a word was said about the persecution of Christians in Muslim countries. Nothing. Other right-wing Trump supporters like Candace Owens or Russell Brand never mention it either. This is awfully strange. I am not that surprised when the left doesn't seem to care about it. Usually, people on the left are not religious or they are even anti-religious. So if a Muslim group burns down a church, they don't really care. Furthermore, those on the left don't want to criticize certain cultures, so they avoid telling the obvious truth, which is that you wouldn't want to be a Christian in a Muslim country. On any list of the 10 most dangerous countries for Christians, 9 of the 10 are Muslim. But the political right, as I see it, and I may be wrong, shouldn't have any problem discussing these facts, as they are very often Christians themselves, to some degree, and value free speech more than being politically correct. Now, you might be saying, what are you talking about? What persecution? So, Christians are the most persecuted people in the world. And if you leave out North Korea, all the countries that Christians suffer the most in are Muslim. That is what I'm talking about. You have probably heard that Israel is accused of genocide, right? But the numbers don't lie. And the number of Arabs in Israel, in Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, and Gaza, has skyrocketed. You know who is being subjected to genocide in the Middle East? Christians. Take any Muslim country and check the number of Christians living there 50 or 100 years ago and compare it to now, whether Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt. You will find that the number of Christians has plummeted because of persecution and, well, genocide. 100 years ago, more than 20% of Turkey's population was Christian. Today, it is a little more than zero, like 0.2. And why? Because of the genocides. Yes, plural. You might have heard about the Armenian genocide. Well, there was another one against the Assyrians. And the Greek genocide. Let's move down from Turkey to the south. Where do you want to start? Lebanon, which was around 75% Christian 100 years ago, and now that figure is around 30%. Syria was 15% Christian, and today it is only 2%. Iraq was 7% Christian, and today it is about 0.5%. Egypt was 20% Christian, and today it is 5%. These facts are what I'm referring to when I say that numbers don't lie. All these ancient communities lived in the Middle East for almost 2,000 years until Muslim colonialization. Not a single minority, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, or any other, is thriving under Muslim rule. Zero. But Tucker Carlson and others aren't saying anything about it. Why is that? In Africa, things are even worse. In the Congo, where just 2 weeks ago, 70 Christians were killed, beheaded to be precise, inside a church. In Nigeria, where Muslims have murdered 50,000 Christians in recent years. In Sudan, which has seen much more killing than that. The number of Christians in Muslim countries has drastically declined. But surprisingly, all is quiet on the right-wing front. Well, not completely quiet, but then just plain wrong. A few months back, Tucker Carlson interviewed Reverend Muntar Isaac, and right at the start, Tucker got things completely wrong. First, he said that Christians are suffering because of US involvement in geopolitics, and he gave the examples of Vietnam and Iraq. I don't know about Vietnam, but in Iraq, Christians were already suffering from persecution before the Gulf Wars. And that doesn't explain the persecution of Christians in all the other Muslim countries we have been talking about in Egypt, Lebanon, or Sudan. Tucker is against the involvement of the US in world conflicts, which is a legitimate opinion. People may well ask why America spends so much money elsewhere when it has enough problems to deal with at home. And it is also legitimate to say there are 2 billion Christians in the world, and it is not Americans' job to make sure that they are safe. It is really sad that in Nigeria and Sudan, thousands of Christians are being killed by Muslim organizations, but it is none of America's business. But what Tucker Carlson says is not only, hey, let's not spend American money on problems outside our own country. He goes on to attempt to discredit Israel and to basically say that Israel is not our ally, and that is where he is wrong. Right at the start, Tucker gives an example of the persecution of Christians by Israel.
But what about Gaza? What about the entire region in the Middle East, where, of course, there's very intense fighting going on? Many Christian churches in the United States, particularly evangelical churches, support that. But there is virtually never a word about the Christians who live there, the ancient Christian community in Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel proper. So because no one has said a word, there has been great suffering among the Christian population in that region. In October, a Greek Orthodox church in the Gaza Strip was hit by an airstrike. We're showing the video now. The church is in ruins. At least 17 people were killed that day. And again, that was hardly the first time that fighting in that region killed Christians. You'll remember the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem almost 20 years ago, where a clergyman was killed in the church with American weapons, and Christian clergy in our country said nothing. And you may be asking yourself, well, wait a second. If Christian leaders won't stand up for the lives of Christians, why have them in the first place? And that's probably a good question.
So, did Israel bomb a church in Gaza? Well, no. During the first days of the war, there was fake news that Israel bombed the church. This fake news did the rounds very quickly. The church itself issued a statement that the story was fake news, as was the Bethlehem story that Tucker mentioned. The way he said it, a clergyman was killed in the church with American weapons, it sounds as if an Israeli killed a clergyman. Well, the real story couldn't be any more different. Palestinian terrorists knew that the Israeli army was going to get them, so they broke into the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Palestinian terrorists have never had any problem using holy sites or hospitals or mosques as shields. The only clergyman who was killed by the Islamic Palestinian terrorist. But Tucker fails to mention that and tells the story in a way that makes you think that Israelis killed the clergyman. The interview with Reverend Muntar Isaac was all about how Christians are suffering in Israel. It is a long interview. And you know what is the worst thing that happens to a Christian in Israel is?
The biggest problem Christians are facing is in East Jerusalem, where they are constantly targeted by radical groups, radical Jewish groups, let's be clear. Sometimes some churches, there was an attempt to burn them. Oftentimes, and this is, you can look at it on social media all over the place, Christian clergy being spit at by these groups. They write very offensive slogans on the wall. There is strong incitements against Christians, especially in the old city of Jerusalem. So,
what kind of slogans? I'm sorry to ask you to pause. What kind of slogans? What kind of graffiti is written against Christians?
We don't want Christians get out of here. Some of it is very, very offensive, actually, that I can say.
This gets to the very heart of what I'm talking about in my videos. Millions of Christians are being persecuted, living in fear and getting murdered. Christian girls are being kidnapped, and churches are being destroyed or turned into mosques. But have you heard what the Jews are doing? They are writing graffiti on a wall outside a church. Now, is what he's saying true? Well, sadly, yes. I visit the old city of Jerusalem every other week, so I can tell you that on Mount Zion, there is tension between the church and the Jews over a 700-year-old building. And a tiny minority of religious Jewish teenagers have this disgusting habit of spitting or making as if they spit on nuns and priests. This has been going on close to the Armenian Church and at the start of the Via Dolorosa. Of course, I think it is horrible and shouldn't be happening. But let's put things in perspective. How many churches have been burned down in Israel? 0. How many Christians have been murdered by Jews? 0. Do Christians enjoy complete freedom in Israel? Yes. But those bad Jews, of course, they should stop the spitting and graffiti and be punished for it. But let's keep a sense of perspective. That's all I'm asking. Another recruiting idea that Tucker drops into the conversation a total of like 5 times is that Israel is a secular state and that, as such, evangelical Christians shouldn't be supporting it. I think this is a really weak argument. Israel is a modern democratic state, like the US and the Western European democracies, and I'm very happy that it is. Israel is also the only Jewish state, and our religion and culture are Jewish. Judaism has evolved over the last 2000 years, but if Jesus, who, by the way, wasn't Catholic or even Amish, but Jewish, if Jesus were to come back now, I, as an Israeli Jew who grew up in Judea, would be able to speak to him. As well as that, I understand the Jewish world he grew up in, and I know the land he lived in. I know the Sea of Galilee and Jerusalem and the olive trees. And by the way, I would also call him by the name he actually used 2000 years ago. There is a heated debate about whether it was Yeshu or Yeshua, but it certainly wasn't Jesus. Tucker, we are the Jews of the Bible living in the land of Israel, and Israel is a democratic state, and I'm very proud of this combination. A few words about the Reverend. I referred to what he said, but let's look at what he didn't say, which is much more interesting. He didn't say a word about persecution of Christians by the Palestinians. He is from Bethlehem, where Muslim terrorists, as I said, entered the Church of Nativity, one of the most important churches in the world, killed a clergyman, and left bombs inside the church. Israeli soldiers risked their lives to neutralize the bombs left in the church by the Islamic terrorists so that no Christian pilgrims would be harmed. He forgot to mention that, even though it happened in his own city. I guess that Jews writing a bit of graffiti on a wall is much more serious than Islamic terrorists planting bombs in one of the most important churches in the world. He also failed to mention that there was one Christian bookshop in Gaza. This shop was bombed a few times until one of the bombs finally killed the owner. But the Reverend forgot about that. The truth is that he didn't forget. If he tells the truth, he will be killed. If he criticizes Muslim society, he puts his life, the life of his family, and his community in danger. That is how it works in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority-controlled Bethlehem. Think about it. How many news articles have you seen about Gaza in the last 2 years? 1 million? And in how many of them have you seen Arabs criticizing Hamas? 0. I know of only one person who has criticized Hamas in Gaza. This video went viral. So first they broke his bones and then they killed him. This is how it works in their culture. When I lived in Berlin 15 years ago, there was a hummus place owned by an Israeli Arab Christian. His family had lived in Nazareth for generations, and he told me that his grandmother, who lived under Ottoman, Turkish rule, British rule, and Israeli rule, always said that given the choice of a Jewish hell or a Muslim paradise, she would choose the Jewish hell in a heartbeat. If you want to watch the whole Tucker Carlson interview, you can click on the link I will be leaving below. I think that is only fair. If you watch it, you will see that the Reverend says that the evangelical church is illegal in Israel. That is a lie. Next to Jaffa Gate, the main entrance to the old city, there is a big evangelical church. And there is another one in Tel Aviv. Don't just take my word for it. Have a look at what they say about themselves in their website. This specific church emphasizes the connection between Christianity and Judaism. So what is the reverend talking about? There is a law in Israel that says that you are not allowed to do missionary work in Israel. For hundreds of years, Jews were made to suffer by their Christian and Muslim neighbors who were trying to convert them. Thousands of Jews have chosen to die rather than convert to Islam or Christianity. This kind of death even has a specific name because it is so traumatic. Mavet al Kiddush Hashem. So, in the tiny and single Jewish state in the world, you can't do missionary work. And by the way, it works both ways. Jews are not allowed to try to convert Muslims and Christians to Judaism either. A few years ago, the Mormon Church wanted to build a university in Jerusalem. Now, the Mormons are known for their missionary work, so they had to promise they wouldn't do it. And now they have a huge campus in Jerusalem. And do you know what happens if a Jew converts to Christianity in Israel? Nothing. If he's an ultra-Orthodox Jew, his family might stop talking to him. And do you know what happens in Muslim countries if a Muslim converts to Christianity? And this is why I gave this video this title. I don't expect too much from this reverend. He could be killed and his church burned down if he told the truth about how Palestinians treat Christians. But Tucker Carlson, one of the biggest podcasters in the world, has a responsibility to tell the truth, and he failed big time. I said that I can understand Americans who ask why America is involved in other countries' conflict. And I say that from my own perspective as an outsider. But I think there are a few reasons to be involved. The first is that there is no such thing as a power vacuum. If you leave, someone else will take up your position as the world policeman. Russia, China, or the Muslim Brotherhood. They all truly hate your core values. And if you don't fight today in the Middle East, you will be fighting tomorrow in Wisconsin. The second reason is the moral one. You are the best. You are a beacon of light in the world. You are not perfect, but let's look at the alternatives from the past decades. Fascism, Nazism, communism, and those of today, Russia, China, and the Muslim world. Ask all those people who burn the flag of America, whether in Columbia University or Iran, or all those people who claim to hate America, if they would rather live in China, Russia, or a Muslim country, and they would all say they wanted to live in the US. The US is the protector of the free world, and doing the right thing isn't easy. The last thing is that, yes, you spend a lot of money on aid and on your army, but I don't think you realize just how much you get back from it. I'm making this video in English because you are the empire. I would much rather speak Hebrew, but I know that if I want my videos to make an impact, I couldn't sit around waiting for you to learn Hebrew. And almost everyone knows where $100 will get them in their own countries. How many people know how much 100 rubles or yuan is really worth? The US sets the tone. You decide what we will be talking about. It is not all great. This whole pronoun thing and I identify as, you could have done better. Again, not everything you do is great, but you set the tone. Suppose I want to visit Wisconsin, then I need a visa. My brother wanted to travel to the US. He applied for a visa, but it was denied. No idea why. And that was the end of the story. He couldn't visit. If Americans want to visit Israel, they just hop on a plane. And by the way, now March is the best time to visit Israel. Tucker, if you are watching, why not come for a visit? I will show you Israel for free. I will show you the Sea of Galilee and Capernaum. I will show you the synagogue where Jesus prayed. We could visit Qumran, where the Jewish group called the Essenes lived, and talk about the importance of baptism. John the Baptist, or let's use his Jewish name, Yochanan, was probably influenced by them. This is where baptism took on its significance as a ritual. I will show you Jerusalem. We would be able to literally walk in Jesus' footsteps as he entered the Jewish temple, and I would show you where Jesus overturned the tables of the moneylenders. After visiting Israel, you will have a much more profound understanding of Israel, Jesus, and the Judeo-Christian values on which our Western society is based. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in Israel. Yalla bye.